My name's Ginn, and my role in the rowing community has been as an athlete for 20 odd years, and I've done a few stints of coaching as well, and I've been heavily involved in, I suppose, trying to influence some of the things around technology that we use and equipment that we use, and yeah, but I'm sort of one of these athletes that has lots of ideas, and get fortunate enough to let's get to explore that out on the water with the crews I'm in. A brief description of my rowing career. Look, I've been to the 4 games, and this was the 4th games out of all those experiences, and I've been fortunate enough to win 3 golds and now 1 silver. Last 6 months was fascinating, just purely from the fact of taking a crew from a selection process, and actually go back a step further, taking a crew from the World Championships coming 3rd, and identifying some possible things that we need to address, and really exposing ourselves, all of ourselves, to who's the personnel that needed to be in the boat, what roles the people need to play. What were the things around, I suppose, the tools we're going to use to help measure and monitor ourselves and stuff like that, and then and ultimately the vision and the approach we were going to take towards the performance. So the 6 months became more focused after selection, and once we got set in the crew and we had myself, Josh Dunkley-smith, Will Lockwood and James Chapman, it was really about understanding where people were at individually, and what we sort of thought our individual strengths were, what we thought our crew strengths were. And that was really a process of checking in over the first 2 weeks when we came together on a camp in Moolumbar on the Tweed River, and we basically progressed it from there, and everything was about always making sure we honoured the idea of what we were trying to achieve long term, which was going as fast as we possibly could in London, and setting up the sort of race that we'd be proud of. And we eventually tagged that as being a drag race. We thought that would work to our strengths, and also that'd be something to get us pretty excited. And we're involved in the London race and came second by 0.6 or 7 of a second, and there's not much in it all the way in the track. And probably my honest assessment of it was that we got our best out of ourselves on the day, and we're all exhausted at the end. And we probably could have gone out and rode that race another 10 times against the Brits, and probably would have had a pretty good ratio of winning and losing sort of thing. So I think the 2 crews were that closely matched. We see them as projects, or I see them as projects. Each Olympic campaign is, and I didn't sort of understand it in '96 so much, but each Olympic campaign is largely a container, and so you have your start point, you have your end point, it's all very clear. Your parameters are obvious, so all that's the same. What's different is you're doing it in 2012 versus '96, 2004 and 2008. What was largely different about it as well was different people, different personnel, and getting to know those people, getting comfortable with those people, letting the trust develop in the group organically, and identifying, I think, things in rowing that have been assumptions about how to move a boat, and trying to work through finding new ways of doing it. Finding new ways to train better and finding new ways to move a boat faster, and that's always been there, but put it in this new context and this new time frame, and with these new people, it was great as an experience. And so it's probably the culmination for me of all these games over 20 years. And yet I didn't sort of feel like I had all the answers. I was a person as a central figure, rather I was just a part of the group, and just trying to lead by example in many ways. I think so. I'm pretty abstract. That's the first part, and I've got a hyperactive imagination, and so unless I'm being challenged, I get bored quickly. So I tend to turn into I've got to be driving the process, and I've got to be involved in things that are generating ideas and finding new ways. If I'm not doing that, I get bored. In that, I've had to learn how to, take on board, things like keeping simple and staying focused and being better concentrated and all that sort of stuff. I do think the way we row, there's a lot of good about it, but I think there's a lot of stuff that, we're stuck in the old ages and we haven't worked out how to, change perspective on that sort of stuff and see through and cut through the reality of what's actually happening there on the water. And I think even from a movement standpoint on the water, there's a lot of things that we can do to make a boat go fast that inherently aren't coached, and athletes don't understand because they're taught a different way. And so there's fundamentals there, I think, that are underlying principles that I'm more interested in than the surface stuff, and I'm more interested in than the results and the outcomes. And so the intent and the feeling and the experience is probably what I focus on more than anything else. And so it is a bit abstract because it's not something you can see. It's not a boat. It's not a program written on a bit of paper, and it's not a final result of Olympic Games. It's the stuff that happens behind the scenes and in the background, I think, for the athletes. So I'm more interested in that and working out how you find efficiency in what you do. And I think other people are trying to get to the same end game. I just probably go about it a little bit differently. I'd like to make a difference in the sport, not just being as an athlete and producing sort of obvious outcomes that maybe other athletes might aspire to do. I was inspired by the likes of the Awesome Foursome, and I've been inspired looking back through the system as to all the athletes that have gone before, and I love being educated by all that. And so I like the idea as an athlete being able to share that. So if nothing else, I'll always have an ongoing process of sharing sort of knowledge or insight, or even asking different kinds of questions. I'm really keen to be involved in the sport, either through working with coaches or athletes, or working with Sykes, like a boat manufacturer, to have a greater impact on the sport, but also just progress the sport. I think there's leaps and bounds that we can take in a very short space of time that we haven't taken yet. And I think that's happening in other sports, and I think if our sport doesn't catch on, we're going to get left behind. And it's great that we've got tradition, but there's things around the innovation of the athlete movement, and there's things around the innovation of the equipment and the technologies we use that I'd like to be a part of, and like to feel that, I suppose, my thought process to it can actually make a difference. And I wouldn't call it revolutionising the sport, because I think largely what you'll see as an end product is the same, but what's going on for the athlete internally and what goes on between the athlete and coach, I think, can be sophisticated and moved along really, really well. And I think at the moment we're still sort of stuck. We're stuck with doing things the same old way, and probably overburdening people with a heap of stuff on the water that they don't really need, and even putting too much information into things, and sort of going, how do you find ways of just cutting through and working out what's actually going to produce the best outcome? I suppose what are the benefits of the upcoming Sydney International Rowing Regatta, and I suppose there's a few things on that. What are the benefits for the athletes involved? What are the benefits for the school kids who get to either see it or hear about it happening? What are the benefits for the coaches and the rowing community in a wider perspective? Let me start with the athletes involved. I think it's great to not have to travel to an event, or large distance travelling, and I think having internationals come here, and we've seen it when the World's run in New Zealand, we've also seen it when people have come to Sydney for the Olympic Games. It means that the advantage swings, and when it's in your backyard, it's easier to perform because you don't have to travel. It's easy to perform because you're comfortable and familiar with the environment. It doesn't mean you just perform naturally, but it can certainly make what you do more effective. From the wider rowing community with the school kids and coaches and all that sort of stuff, I think the ability for people to get there and see it. I've been a visual person all my life, and I find that if I'm there watching stuff, I just pick up so much more than if I'm told stuff. So I think people to get to the regatta it will be immense, and the ability to see the world's best rowers, those who come out here and patronise the event, will be great. And hopefully spend a bit of time watching people train, watching people around the regatta site, seeing how they go about racing, and getting a first-hand experience. I think 1990, when the Worlds were in Barrington, I think that is a moment in time which actually set Australian rowing on a different path. And so I think this will have the same sort of effect as that. And I think from the wider community, it gives rowing a place in terms of what's going on in the media. And hopefully they can get a bit more traction that way, as to you have a major event, there's more reason for the papers and the television to sort of come out and cover it, and I think we've got to be smart about leveraging that and using that. And so I think the event will be great. I think why they've pitched for it is really important, that they're trying to position the sport better inside Australia, and so for the rowers and everyone, I think they'll get a great benefit out of it. I think just be yourself. I think for me, if you're enthusiastic and you're passionate about what you're doing and you've got great curiosity, then you perform well. And whether or not it's actually rowing in a boat or being involved in rowing in another form, be it coaching or in a club or whatever it might be, I think that enthusiasm for the sport is what always stands out, and what lasts. If people are doing it for the wrong reasons, they don't last. You don't last in a training session. You don't back up week after week if your motivation's not right. And so, being yourself and tapping into that sort of motivation and that fuel, I think, is really critical. And never be scared to ask questions. I think there's some really good athletes and coaches around who are very much willing to share. But they're often not in the right environment or format to do that. But if you get access to them, you can send them an email, you can find access to them at things like the conference here and all that sort of stuff. When you're at a regatta, seek people out who you think you might learn from, and never be backwards in coming forwards.